Let's take a look how to change and adjust the tones in our images with Adobe Lightroom. We can see here the histogram, which is telling me which is the distribution of tones in the image. As you might know, histograms work in the following way. Here in the X-axis, we have the tonal range going from black at the left, then shadows, midtones, highlights, and whites to the very right. Here in the Y-axis, we have the amount of pixels which are corresponding or which are represented in the image and which correspond to each of the tonal values that we have in this X-axis. So basically, when you have a histogram like this, it's telling you that we don't have any blacks, we have very few shadows, we have quite a lot of midtones, and then we have few highlights and whites. In this case, the midtones correspond to the sky and the snow, with just a little bit of highlights here which correspond to the sky. Then no shadows, we can see no black values, this is the darkest area, which corresponds to this side of the histogram. So these are the tones. How can we change the tonal values in our images? Well, on Adobe Lightroom or in any other post-processing tool, we will find something like here. We have sliders which are going to control different tonal ranges or stretches which correspond to different areas of the tones in the histogram. As we can see, we have exposure, which is going to control mostly the midtones, and then we have some others like highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, which are going to affect, as we can see, different areas of tones here: blacks, shadows, midtones, highlights, and whites. So basically, with these sliders, we have the possibility to target the tonal adjustments to very narrow areas of tones in the whole image. Now, another option that we have in order to change the values of tone is the use of the tonal curve. This is something we can use in Adobe Photoshop, Lightroom, or in any other software. Most of them, they allow us to adjust the image by using curves. The way these curves work is as follows. Normally, these curves are like a mathematical function, which are relating, let's say, input values to output values. Input values happen here, horizontal axis, and then the output values are given by the curve on the vertical axis. As we can see, there is a histogram drawn here in the background, which is telling me more or less which are the areas in terms of tones along the X-axis and the Y-axis. These are blacks, shadows, midtones, highlights, and whites. So the way the curve works is as follows. If I put a point, I can click and add a point and I raise it up. What is going to happen is that now for an input value of 50% tone, which is right in the middle, midtone, I'm going to obtain something like 75%, which is a highlight. So basically, this has translated into an increase of luminosity all over the image in all tones alike. Now you see this delta, this distance between the original curve and the final curve is giving me the amount of brightening that has happened in the corresponding tone. So as we can see, midtones are the tones which get the maximum boost of luminosity. Towards the highlights or towards the shadows, you see this delta, this distance gets smaller and smaller. That means that we are affecting these tones, shadows and highlights, a little bit less than we are affecting the midtones. Now we can do something the other way. What we are doing is now darkening all the tones, but mostly the midtones. You see what's going on to the histogram also? As we lighten up all the values, the histogram drifts towards the right. If I do just the opposite, the histogram goes towards the left. So as we can see, we can change the tonal values easily by adding a point.